et de gouvernement, s'il vous plaît. Voilà. Très bien, donc nous commençons à accueillir les chefs d'État et de gouvernement. Nous souhaitons la bienvenue aux chefs d'État et de gouvernement. Les chefs d'État et de gouvernement en compagnie de son Excellence M. Macky Sall, président de la République du Sénégal. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, messieurs et madame de la presse. Merci beaucoup. Nous allons démarrer la cérémonie. Nous demandons, s'il vous plaît, à la presse de regagner l'espace qui leur est réservé à l'arrière de la salle. Merci d'avance. Attention, ça va tomber. Attention. Merci, chers confrères et consoeurs, de regagner vos places à l'arrière de la salle pour que nous puissions démarrer cette cérémonie. Merci beaucoup. Je suis Dr Nafissatou Diouf et je suis très ravie d'être la maîtresse de cérémonie de ce haut sommet. Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République, Monsieur Macky Sall, Président en exercice de l'Union africaine, Excellence, Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Messieurs et Madame les présidents d'institutions de la République du Sénégal, Monsieur le directeur général des opérations de la Banque mondiale, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation, Mesdames, Messieurs les ambassadeurs, représentants des institutions internationales et des partenaires techniques et financiers, Mesdames, Messieurs, honorables invités, en vos rangs, titres, grades et qualités, nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue ici en terre sénégalaise à l'occasion de ce sommet de haut niveau consacrant le lancement officiel de la 20e reconstitution des fonds de l'Association internationale pour le développement de l'Afrique, IDA. Cette rencontre est une initiative de son Excellence M. Macky Sall, président de la République du Sénégal, président en exercice de l'Union africaine et de la Banque mondiale. Le chronogramme de la journée se déroulera comme suit, avec 3 grandes parties. La première partie sera d'abord consacrée au visionnage d'un film sur l'IDA. Ensuite, vous pourrez suivre une introduction de M. Axel van Trotzenberg, directeur des opérations de la Banque mondiale, sur le thème « Financement de la relance et de la transformation économique en Afrique ». Enfin, nous pourrons écouter le discours d'ouverture de son Excellence M. Macky Sall, président de la République du Sénégal et par ailleurs président en exercice de l'Union africaine. À l'issue de ce discours, il vous sera proposé une pause café pour les participants de la présente session, alors que les chefs d'État et de gouvernement seront à huis clos, avec un panel qui sera modéré par le président de la République du Sénégal. Dans la deuxième partie, en ouverture, il y aura une séance de haut niveau, comme je l'ai dit, modérée par le président de la République, puis le ministre des Finances et du Budget, M. Abdoulaye Daouda Diallo, fera la lecture de l'appel à l'action en présence des médias. La troisième partie sera l'un des temps forts de cette journée, avec le discours de son Excellence M. Macky Sall, président de la République du Sénégal, au Salon Vert. Puis, son Excellence, le président de la République du Sénégal, offrira un déjeuner en l'honneur des chefs d'État et de gouvernement. Mesdames, Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, honorables invités, je vous invite à présent à visionner un film sur l'IDA.
Diversité, jeunesse, force, résilience, c'est l'Afrique. Un continent débordant de potentiel, comptant d'importantes réalisations en matière de développement et résolu à relever tous les défis. L'Association internationale de développement, aussi connue sous son sigle anglais IDA, est un partenaire de longue date de l'Afrique. L'IDA est fière de soutenir la résilience des Africains en investissant dans l'éducation, la santé, l'innovation numérique et les infrastructures, en créant des emplois et en œuvrant pour la sécurité alimentaire, en favorisant l'autonomisation des femmes et en veillant à ce que personne ne soit laissé pour compte, en soutenant les pays face aux crises telles que Ebola, la Covid-19 et les conflits, et en renforçant la prévention pour anticiper les chocs, notamment ceux liés au changement climatique. L'IDA affiche des résultats probants à travers toute l'Afrique. Aujourd'hui, face aux multiples crises mondiales, l'IDA est plus que jamais déterminée à travailler avec les pays pour relever leurs défis de développement. Avec ce nouveau cycle d'IDA 20, la Banque mondiale se tient prête à accompagner le continent africain à recouvrer les gains perdus et à poursuivre ses avancées sur la voie de la transformation économique. L'IDA fait la différence en Afrique.
Je vous prie d'applaudir, s'il vous plaît. Merci beaucoup. À présent, je vous prie, messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, honorables invités, à suivre la présentation de M. Axel van Trotzenberg. Il est le directeur général des opérations de la Banque mondiale. Sous vos applaudissements, s'il vous plaît.
Good morning, Your Excellency, President Macky Sall, Your Excellencies, Heads of State, Your Excellencies, Prime Ministers and Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor to be here with you today, and I would really like, on behalf of the World Bank, thank President Macky Sall for this initiative to have this meeting. And I thank him in his capacity as the President of the African Union to have organized, if you wish, this launching event for IDA 20. This is very important that we get together and see how the international community, and particularly the World Bank, can assist Africa in its development aspiration. So for us, the point of departure are the ambitions of the African countries, the ambition to grow inclusively and sustainably, create jobs, as well as to make sure that the human capital is improved, be it in the education, in the health area, and also keeping in mind that we are confronted with a situation of multiple crises where over the last 2 years we have seen a reversal of fortunes in the world, but also in Africa, and we have seen that unfortunately reflected in increasing poverty rates around the world. So this is where also IDA comes in. We need to be part of supporting African countries to be part of the success, but here I would like to send also one of the first major messages. The World Bank is a long-term partner and will stay a long-term partner, and whether that is in good times, but what is even more important, when times are more challenging and difficult, and we will stay there. I think what is very helpful in this IDA 20 cycle, that there has been a difference, is namely that the African heads of state have taken a direct interest in the directions of the negotiations of IDA. And that started last year when we had decided that with the IDA 19 resources, we should truncate the normally 3-year period in 2 years, given the crisis and given the needs of the continent to need more resources. So therefore we needed to negotiate early the IDA 20. What was particularly helpful was that Mr. Alassane Ouattara offered to organize a summit in July of last year to discuss also the strategic directions that IDA 20 may take. And there we created the Abidjan Declaration that was actually very, very helpful to help negotiate the policy package. And I would like to mention particularly a couple of ideas that were ultimately reflected in the package. One is jobs, jobs, jobs. This came everywhere. There is an incredible challenge. Every year, millions of young Africans are entering the labor market, and not always all the jobs are available. So a huge emphasis on this. Another thing where we have been learning a lot from yourselves is the emphasis over regional integration. You recently included an important trade pact, and the reason is that regional integration could be a motor for growth, needs to be supported, and that was in there. I thank you for that strong participation, because I think that the package became better as a result of that. The negotiations ultimately resulted in a $93 billion package that over the next 3 years, and of which about 23.5 billion were through contributions by donors. Now, I know that a lot of donors are linked by video conference, so let me also thank them for their continued strong commitment, their also engagement with their parliaments to ensure the package that we could negotiate. So a sincere thank you to all the donors who are linked up. But also what was important that during the negotiations, we benefited from the borrower representatives. Half of the borrower representatives are from Africa, and they made sure that these things that were also reflected in the Abidjan Declaration were ultimately in the package. And I think here I would like to also mention something that is more challenging, and that is particularly the countries that are confronted by fragility. And one of the big problems is that once countries are engaged in conflict or where fragility is, many are withdrawing their support. The World Bank took a different decision. Instead, fragility requires more support, continued support, not walking away. And just to give you a sense, the last fiscal year for the Horn of Africa and the Sahel, we provided about $10 billion of support. And I think that is what needs to be seen, is that we need to stay engaged. In general, I think I would like to make another important point of the evolving nature of IDA. IDA was created in 1960 essentially to deal with particularly challenges in Asia, particularly India. But now, over the last 20 years, it has systematically moved towards Africa. Just to give you a sense, in around 2000, we provided about 15% of our resources, of our total resources. This is only the IDA resource. We have also IBRD resources. Those were going to Africa. Last year, it was almost half. And so it is very clear that this is going to stay. And what is even more important, in the case of IDA, we're getting close to $30 billion. But what is most important is that of the package that was negotiated, the $93 billion, 70% will go to Africa. Our expectation is that it will go and so the big challenge, and therefore I'm happy that we have this meeting, is we are launching this implementation, so it will be a lot of hard work ahead of us. But what we would like to discuss also with you, how can we best strategically use these $65 billion to the maximum benefit of the continent? And I think as strategic choices to do a little bit more of everything, or you say we need to more strategically invest in certain activities. And your guidance and your discussion would be very appreciated, because that is what we need. Now then the hard work comes. What we have also said, operationally, you cannot work out of Washington. It is important to have an office in Washington. Most important is to have a presence in all of the African continents, and we're happy that we have it. We have right now 1,800 people on the ground working from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Addis to Joburg. I think this is what we need. The big advantage of being in the countries that we not only learn about your culture, about your history, but also better understand your needs. And that is going to be the key to our success in helping African countries to have the next year, hopefully, more successful, because we are all faced with this multiple crisis, and the last one is the crisis from the fallout from the war in Ukraine, which affects you badly through the channel of higher fuel prices, higher commodity price, and as a consequence, unfortunately, also higher inflation. And inflation, we all know, is the worst enemy of the poor. So that is where we will need to have. So just a couple of ideas where I think we received a lot of advice and suggestions on how one could strengthen this. One is energy access. And I think this is one of the ways where, how can we support Africa to accelerate energy access? Having worked on East Asia, I sometimes was impressed how countries like Vietnam were able to increase access by 75 percentage points in 20 years. And the question I often say is, how can we repeat that revolution also in Africa? And I think there are very good conditions potentially for it when we are thinking not only nationally, but also regionally and through the continent. A very promising development is, for example, the West African power pool that we are supporting. And our interest is, how can we actually, through our operations, support and increase that ambition, be it in the areas in the energy area, and that can be from the renewable to gas to power. And that you have the necessary base load to actually scale up further the energy. So this is a topic where we are in dialogue, but for us, the interest is, how can we be part of an accelerator in the individual countries? Another important topic is digital. It is now everywhere being talked about, digital revolution, and also the African Union during the presidency of President Kagame in 2019 agreed that the African continent should be completely digitally connected by 2030, meaning all Africans should have access. How can we support it? You see already progress here in the case of broadband, but how can we make that next leap? How can you best use the IDA resources for this? In this context, it seems to me also how one can mobilize here the private sector and use smartly those IDA resources that are needed by the public sector, but see how you can leverage private sector investment in these areas. Again, we would think that we can make a lot of progress. We have already quite a few projects in the pipeline. One plea we would like to make is particularly on the digital development, how one could actually harmonize the regulatory frameworks so that one doesn't face with a plethora of regulatory frameworks that may be not compatible with each other. So this may be also part of the regional integration area. Another area, and that is a more sobering one, that is food security. The crisis and the war in Ukraine have again highlighted the issue of food insecurity. Unfortunately, because of this war, there is an increase, there is a double increase. First, everybody feels the higher prices. Secondly, food insecurity is increasing and infecting millions around the world, including in Africa. And so what the World Bank in general has decided, and we announced that in April, we cannot wait. So we have said we will provide worldwide new resources to the tune of $12 billion, and 18 billion is available from existing operations, so up to $30 billion. In the first 3 months since April, we have committed almost $6 billion across the world, of which 3.9 billion was to Africa. Demand is high. My sense is maybe higher than the 12 billion that we have indicated. We will respond to this. And what I think is important in this context, we have to have a dual track approach. We have to respond to crisis as well as to the long-term needs, meaning that we have to work towards long-term reduction of food insecurity, and that means better resilience, better agricultural systems. And we have lately provided regional projects. one for West Africa for food system strengthening, and 2 weeks ago for East Africa and Southern Africa. Clearly, a lot more needs to be done. I think there is a good potential that we combine crisis management with also a long-term view, how we can improve the situation. And here, let me just reiterate, we have all the willingness and resolve to help you in this regard, because this is core development. I reminded the board of the World Bank when we discussed the East African food system strengthening project 2 weeks ago, that I said, here we are sitting together almost 50 years after the 1974 conference that was meant to eradicate hunger, and we still have this. This is not a good signal of the international community. We have to do better, and the only way to do it is together see how we can confront this problem and once and for all help solve it. And you will be able to count on World Bank support on this. But when we are thinking of food security, it is not only on agriculture system. We need also to think of social protection systems. And I think the good news is we learned a lot over the years that we need to have much better social security systems. We learned a lot from the Latin American debt crisis to build that, and now in many African countries we have social protection systems that allow you to react very fast to adverse developments. And I think this was also very important during the crisis of the COVID crisis, that was able to count on social protection measures. We have been scaling this up enormously over the last 3 years. Just to give you, we were investing on social protection, health and education, and we put worldwide about $65 billion into the countries to help deal with this very, very difficult challenge. So we think that this is something that we will need to continue to be focused on, particularly the problem you are facing, and even also the World Bank is facing. In times of crisis, you tend to get so focused on crisis measures that sometimes you don't anymore talk about the sustainable development goals and the poverty reduction. I think we need to continue to force ourselves to be effective crisis managers, but never lose sight of the longer-term challenges. And here, I think human capital is essential. I was very happy yesterday that I had the chance to visit here in Senegal a higher education, professional education institute that trains young Senegalese for the job market. And what is wonderful to see is that with this kind of training, these kids are finding jobs. Over 90% when they get out of school are finding jobs. So what I really think is education will be key for also the job agenda, and how can we actually sustain this and support it. But that investment we will need to undertake, and I think we will need also to scale this up further. I want to finish, and that is important for your considerations when you're looking particularly at the $65 billion. The way this is negotiated is that about 2/3 of the amount is allocated to every country. We call that performance-based allocation, but it is about 2/3 of the money. Now, increasingly, there have been requests, be it from your side as well as from donor side, to have some windows that provide additional money. But that is now a substantial amount, is about $22 billion, a third of that as well. And they are in various forms. One is the scale-up window that allows to receive additional money for high-impact investments that can demonstrate transformational impact. A very important one is the regional window, and that has almost $8 billion. This is the window that many of you have been advocating, and it tends to be used to the max. And there is even often higher demand. For many countries that are hosting refugees, you know yourself that you are confronted with an additional cost, and that you have to manage in times of fiscal stress when the world economy is not doing that well. And so what we would like to offer is also a refugee window that allows country to, first of all, be grateful for the fact that you are hosting refugees, but also recognizing that you need some additional support to make it possible to attend to all the demands of these refugees. Another important one is the crisis response window that we have created actually during the financial crisis almost 13 years ago. This window is extremely in high demand, and certainly now, for example, with the food crisis, that many of you are facing not only fiscal stress, balance of state payment stress. So you see these extra costs are directly translated in a higher fiscal deficit, and for that you need additional support. Finally, we have also a private sector window, and then the whole idea is that when people are talking about private sector investment, it talks easily, but then everybody wants to be de-risked. And so, in the end, you are in a vicious circle. What we have said to our private sector arm, that is the IFC, and directed by a Senegalese, by Makta Diop, he and I go back a long time. We have worked very closely. But what is most important is it may help investments to de-risk. And that is very important. I think they are using these resources fully. I would only advise be aggressive on that, to use them. On the windows in general, what I say, all of you are sitting here, but in those there is competition. Because basically, I'm always a use it or lose it. So one of the important things is that these resources are going to where the demand is. And if you have a lot of demand, then indeed you can use a lot of these resources. Let me just say this, that we are very excited about the support we have been receiving from you politically, through also your finance ministers, through your other sectoral ministers in developing the work, because it is one thing to talk about it, it is the other to really develop the projects. And we have been impressed